I'm so excited to be here today with Sevilla King of the YouTube channel A Quality Existence. And Sevilla and I have both been doing a lot of exploring in the Jordan Peterson universe for the last few years. And I've been listening to Sevilla a lot the last few weeks. And I'm kind of convinced that she and I both have a little piece of the puzzle, and it would be fun to kind of put our puzzle pieces together.
Oh, that
and
sounds
see
fun.
if we have anything to offer into the Jordan Peterson universe. So Sevilla, I was particularly captured by the video that you did with Jonathan Peugeot a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
So I've been listening to that over and over again. And I wanted to pick out just a couple of pieces where you're kind of coalescing the whole picture of what you've been doing. Mm-hmm. Because I thought it would give us a place, kind of a jumping off point to start talking about terminology and what the meanings are underneath all those things. Does that sound okay?
That sounds fine.
Okay, so I'm going to...
You're going to do the share screen?
I'm going to do share screen here. And in the share screen business, I'm going to bring up the video that you were doing with Jonathan. And there's really a lot more here that I'd love to go over, and we might go back to it later. But for now, I'm going to start at this point at minute 13. And I have to back it up. Sometimes the sound acts weird. So
value, you know, in the actual rational framework. What you say is, no, there is, because it's ensconced in this greater value. And I think, and that's very similar to what Pirsig would say. He would say that the metaphysics of quality is value creating the universe. Mm-hmm. And I want to just briefly mention one thing about his philosophy that I think makes it a little bit more apparent. Mm-hmm. So when Fittedness is the character in Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, and what he is he's the original Pirsig, before Pirsig had electroshock therapy for what was diagnosed as schizophrenia. And Pirsig is really brilliant, you know, so he's off in this direction, trying to unite, trying to do a lot of what we're talking about here. He's identified that there's classic quality, which is, you know, the more rational, the mechanical, the rational, and then there's romantic, which is aesthetics. Mm-hmm. And so as he's trying to, he realizes that if you're just looking at things in these polar opposites, like you were saying, polarization, you're not going to get the full picture. You can explain most of the world with the subject-object way of looking at things, but you're not going to explain these ephemeral qualities that you have in romantic quality. So he makes a really big breakthrough when he discovers the mathematician Poincaré. And Poincaré is where, you know, looking, like we said, now there's all these facts, and now we have even more, because the internet introduces just, you know, an explosion of facts. Yeah. And these facts will present themselves, and you don't know which ones are right. So say you're working on something and you care about this project, but you don't know what the next step is, and you can't just observe everything objectively and figure it out. You have to care. You have to have this essential state of wanting it to be better. Hmm. And so Poincaré found that when he's working on a mathematical problem, there's what you would say a quality detector in, this is his theory, mm-hmm. in pre-intellectual awareness, you know, before like consciousness, but unconscious. Yeah. And in that pre-intellectual awareness, that's where quality makes itself known to you. You don't actually have a will. You can't say, I mean, yeah. Well, let me go into it in a second. But in there, so the next quality step kind of presents itself, and then that comes into awareness. Yeah.
So it's a form of intuition. I mean, it's the click, right. It's the aha.
Okay, before he says intuition, I want to stop it before he says intuition. When you're talking about this pre-intellectual awareness and how quality makes itself known, whole bunch of ideas came up into my head because a while back I was doing a lot of study of Esther Meek. And Esther Meek, let's see if I can share this on the screen. No, that's not what I want. I want this. Esther Meek put together this epistemology that she calls Covenantal Epistemology, or the epistemology of love.
Could you tell me who she is?
Esther Meek is a philosopher. She's a professor at some small college on the East Coast. She's not extremely well known, but she has written a number of books, and she has this very interesting idea about what is the nature of knowing. So when you're talking about this pre-intellectual awareness and how quality makes itself known to you, it sounds very much like this thing that she's talking about. And I'm just going to read a few. This is a book review that somebody did about her work, because to try to read her whole work and coalesce it down, I didn't want to take the time to do that. So I used another guy's summary.
No, it makes sense.
And I think he has a very good summary here. It's a concept she picked up from Michael Polanyi, who was a scientist, philosopher kind of a person who was very well known, and is called subsidiary focal integration. Now, I always worry about all these things when they use these big words, because
these terms,
because I think you feel the same way. What's important about a way of looking at the world that will work for everybody is that it's not only scalable, but it also works across all kinds of people, whether they're limited in intellectual capacity or brilliant, right? It has to be scalable. So subsidiary focal integration is really not all that fancy an idea. I'm going to read a couple quotes about it, and then I think it'll become apparent what it means. We focus on something, but we are capable of indwelling that focal point only because we are anchored in subsidiary knowledge. Now, you watched The Four Horsemen with Jordan Peterson, right?
Yeah, I've watched it a couple of times.
Yeah. And in that conversation, one of the things that Jordan Peterson does is kind of riffs on this idea of, I'm looking at your eyes, John, and I'm focused on them. And that focus, I can see your eyes very clearly, but as the focal area gets larger and larger and out to the margins, it gets less clear. But my looking at your eyes is nested inside another purpose, and that purpose is nested inside another purpose, and it goes all the way up to the highest purpose of all. So this nesting is important, right? That's one way of thinking about subsidiarity, is all the ways that something can be nested upward and outward. But another way of thinking of subsidiarity is all of the different kinds of embodied cognition that we have, tacit knowledge that we've developed. You know, you build your knowledge base up from childhood, proprioception on how to walk and how to anchor yourself to the earth when you're walking and not fall over, and all of those things, that becomes part of your subsidiarities, the things that make it possible for you to do the next thing. So you can't indwell a focus unless you already have all these subsidiarities in place.
Yeah, and so at that point, all that is mostly unconscious. You know, it's automatic. Is that what you said?
Yes. Well, it can become. I mean, the best thing is to get it automatized, right? When you're playing piano, you learn all these things, and then you want certain parts of it to be absolutely automatic, so that
I think that's what
something else can take over.
Yeah.
So that you can focus on the pathos, the communication aspect of it.
Absolutely,
right?
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, you don't have to think about all these other things. So to go on, subsidiaries arise from felt bodily senses, from normative guides or frameworks, and from the situation itself where we begin our puzzled inquiry. So also in the conversation with Jonathan, you brought up a book, The Way We Are.
Yeah.
and it showed a little box that was kind of a matrix with some things in it. And you said, this is what we're born with. All these little pieces. We're born with this capacity to fragment or a capacity to cohere.
Yeah, I can get it if you want. It's right over here.
It's okay. I mean, I'm just trying to connect with you on this idea that we are born with a certain kind of a framework that then starts getting filled out by all the things that we learn.
That's right.
Okay. And let me build on that for just a second. We're born with the capacity to fragment or the capacity to cohere. So I started thinking about that. Well, because I come from a perspective that God is intimately connected with my birth and the birth of all human beings, that he created us out of his love, then there has to be a reason that I would have been born with a capacity to either fragment or cohere. And it made me think about a tree. So a tree is built in such a way that it can, some trees, particularly palm trees, are built with the capacity to bend with the wind, take an extreme amount of abuse from the wind. But what gets them to go upright? The thing that gets them to go upright is they keep seeking the sun, and the sun is up, right? So, and the other idea that comes in here is this idea of opponent processing, that we're strengthened by that which works against us. And so in a sense, we could very well be built with our own internal opponent processing, and that strengthens us. But the only way it can strengthen us so that we cohere is that if we keep our eyes upward.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. So when you're talking, all these things start coming together for me. So the normative guides or frameworks, these are the things that we're built with this capacity, and then things start glomming onto us, and we start adopting ideas, adopting things into our framework that build out who we are as people, so that each of us is a completely unique individual with the ultimate goal of cohering. Okay. So she goes on to say, and I'm right down here now in this section, I can't focus without the subsidiary knowledge, but I can't focus on the subsidiary without losing the whole. So it's like if you're trying to play the piano, if you start focusing on all the lessons you learned about how your hands are supposed to be on the keys and with what intensity you strike the keys, and all, you just lose the whole thing. You forget where you are, so. And another thing that she says, I think is really clever here, is a hammer examined and a hammer swung might as well be two different things. Modern epistemology, where knowledge is information, is mistaken because it renders subsidiaries permanently focal. It makes you focus always on the things that are subsidiary rather than the main point. Now, I'm a little bit tremulous here about this idea because you know how Jordan Peterson says that attention our rationality can only work on what attention gives us to work on, which is very similar to McGilchrist's idea that the left hemisphere can only work on what the right hemisphere offers. And well, so maybe in that sense, it does make sense, because I tend to think of this subsidiary aspect as being the right hemisphere and the focal, but maybe it's the opposite. That would be really interesting. Maybe the focal is the right hemisphere and the subsidiaries are the left hemisphere.
It sounds to me, I mean, I think you're right. It sounds to me like the focal would be the left.
Well, that was my first impulse.
So what is changing your mind?
Well, ultimately, it doesn't really matter because the two need to be integrated. That's the key to this whole thing, right?
Yeah.
But the subsidiaries are all the skills that you learn so that you can do the thing, like with playing the piano, you learn all these skills. They're manual dexterity, and they're rationally learning how to read the text and all of those things. But then the focal point becomes the focus of the whole thing is the creation of beauty.
Mhm.
And we tend to think of the left hemisphere as being the rational tower building.
Yeah.
Right. And so this may be one of those things where this doesn't map exactly onto that.
Yeah, I think that's what it sounds like, because from what I remember, it's been a while since I've went into McGilchrist at all, but from what I remember, he says that it's not, you know, that in different activities such as this, it's kind of working together, because what I was talking about with Jonathan over there was exactly that. It was, you're doing a project, and the goal is, you know, artistic excellence. Let's just say you're either playing something, you're trying to play this piano piece, you're trying to play it well technically, and you're also trying to play it with emotion.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, at least at the very basic, I don't really think much in this terminology anymore, the classic romantic, because I'm so much into Lila these days. But that classic and romantic working together, I think, is the important factor.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't know if that would be integration per se, but in this particular case, let's just talk about playing the piano. You know, the left brain is getting it right technically, and the right brain is doing the aesthetic, is doing the romantic quality, is in playing it in a certain way, and that's in the moment. You know, you're making those value judgments in the moment. Now,
without the integration, there's nothing, right?
Without the integration, there's nothing. You're either gonna mess up, like you said, because you don't have this higher purpose of beauty, or I mean, both situations would make you do it inadequately.
So this is one of the things where I really admire what McGilchrist has done. I mean, he's got a phenomenal mind, and what he has accomplished and how he can tie all these threads together is just amazing.
Yeah.
But his idea of the master and his emissary, I think is, I mean, in my mind, it's just a little bit off, because it's indicating that the one is superior to the other. And I see it, and this is strange, because in some of the recent talks I've heard him give, when he's talking about it, a lot of the examples that he give are much more like a marriage than they are like a master and his emissary.
Yeah, I think that's
and
right.
that's the way it seems to me too. It's a marriage.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right.
Right? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think what McGilchrist is saying, which you know is a big observation in this corner, is that the left brain has just been given too much credit. And it's not so much that the right brain is, I guess he's kind of a romantic guy in a way, even though he's a technical guy. So I think he's in a mode, this is just, I'm reading his mind. I think he's in a mode where he's thinking the right brain is better because we're missing it so much. But I think ultimately, I wonder if he'd say that. I wonder if he'd say one is better than the other when they're so deeply enmeshed. You know, they're a pair that is you can't separate them. If you do separate them and you focus too much on one side or the other, you get major problems. And that's one way of describing the problems that we're talking about in this corner, which is that there's just too much rationality, there's too much left brain, there's too much materialism, and not enough of this whole other side that we've completely neglected. And I guess for a few hundred years, I guess they point to the Enlightenment or even earlier.
Well, I wonder if one of the reasons he doesn't avoid talking about it as a marriage is that he he finds anathema the idea that the right brain is feminine and the left brain is masculine. So he doesn't want to set that idea in people's minds.
Yeah, because that's one of those, stumbling blocks that people have had, like taking that so literally.
Mm-hmm. But I also think that that's just a pattern error, because there's a misunderstanding of the archetypal nature of the masculine and feminine.
Exactly. And that we have, that all of us have both within us.
Exactly.
Like Jordan said, in women, the feminine is forward and the masculine is in the background, and men vice versa. And of course, there's variations of that, as we know.
Yes. And I've known perfectly suitable marriages where the wife had much more of the masculine and the husband had much more of the feminine, but it still worked because they had the marriage of the two, right? Yeah. So let's go on just a little bit more here, because I want to see if you like this idea.
Okay.
Rather, the relationship between subsidiary clues and focal pattern is one of integration, an imaginative synthesizing of a transforming three-dimensional pattern. Now, I like this. She just sneaks in that three-dimensional pattern. I haven't read the book, so I don't know what she means by that.
Yeah.
But it seems to me that the third dimension is this upward dimension.
That makes sense. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
So integration is passive. I thought this was interesting too. We submit to the pattern of clues. They just sort of start falling into place like tumblers in a lock, right?
Yeah. And that, I think, is that pre-intellectual understanding. Things fall into place when you, let's just say you're headed for that higher thing. You're on the quality track, and that being there, having that as your way forward, caring about it, is going to unconsciously choose from all these possibilities the things that line up the most with whatever you're doing. And it's almost a magical process. Well,
that's the way Jordan Peterson describes finding the way forward, by putting your focus on the highest possible good. That's what brings all those things into place. Okay. So yet it has a creative dimension. The knower creatively scrabbles to indwell clues to achieve a focal pattern. A scrabbling that takes love and commitment, a pledge to the real. Now, this reminded me of when you talk about how you have to care. When you're fixing the motorcycle, you have to care whether or not you get something better than what you had before, right? Yeah. And a perfect example of not caring is, he says, and here's the mechanic who's pretty much, he just wants to get through the 8-hour day and go home and not think about motorcycles again. And that's where you're going to get, substandard work. They're just going to do what they need to do and go home. But, and in the book, it shows how he's really deliberating over all these things and thinking ahead and coming up with solutions. It's the problem solving itself. Problem solving really works best when you care. You don't just, throw something on and, like the minimum thing and go on with it. Like the problem solving, it's interesting. It's like Jordan says, if you're in that standpoint of doing what is best now, in the future, and for everyone else, that same principle is going to apply to quality motorcycle maintenance. Makes me think of a whole lot of things that are a little bit off topic here that maybe we can loop back in later. But when my husband talks to me about what it is that makes Silicon Valley produce all these quality products, it's exactly what you just described there, except that the motivation, he always says there's three motivations that make a person strive to produce quality work. One is money. One is getting appropriate kudos in your work, and one is the working environment. Yeah. So you got to have at least two of the three, right? Or you're not going to stick with it. What do you think? And that all sounds very materialistic. It does. Yeah, I was just going to say, what do you think of those three things? When I listen to it, I think it all sounds very materialistic, but then there is also an aspect of what you would have to say is what is the reality that's at the base of everything? And
Mhm.
I mean, if I think of, say, economics,
Mhm.
I'm a strong believer that free market economics is a structure that's built into the universe.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Okay, so what that means is that people are motivated. People are motivated by wanting to do something good, but they're also motivated by money. And so there is, and whether that's an aspect of the fall or not, I don't know.
Mhm.
But let's say you want to sell something, you're going to try to get the very best price you can get. And the
Mhm.
person who wants to buy it from you, they want to get it for the very best price that they can pay. And the only way that you can, in a free market, the only way you can make a deal is if both sides are satisfied. But they're both looking out for their own best interests, right?
Mhm.
So maybe that's the alternate reality. I mean, we tend to always be thinking of this quality reality that is there somehow, this crystalline, beautiful reality. But then we also live in this, what does she use the word, scrabbling? We live in this scrabbling reality that we inhabit, you know. Anyway, she goes on, she says, it is creative, but it is no mere fabrication. I think what she means there is that you're not just manufacturing something, it's actually a creative process. And in the moment of integrating subsidiary clues with a focal pattern, we have contact with reality.
Yeah, that's the quality event.
Okay, so I
Yeah.
thought that she was on exactly the same track that you
Yeah.
were. Yeah.
Because that is the most real thing. It's that, you know, it's a timeless moment, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
It's tapping into the highest good, because there's not any, there's that moment of where everything just comes together, isn't motivated. It's not motivated by anything but quality. Now, what you do with it after, you know, that can go one way or another.
And so could you follow up on that?
So say you're working on something to make money, and what the next thing to do hits you, the quality thing hits you. What would a good example be? Like let's come up with an example. That would make it a little easier if we can come up with some kind of example. What do you think what's an example that you think she's talking about?
Well, one of the examples that she uses in another article that I read of hers is learning to prune a rose bush.
Mhm.
That in order to prune a rose bush, in order to do it properly, in order to do it with quality,
Mhm.
you have to develop a relationship with the rose bush.
That's right,
You have
yeah.
to know what makes it tick, so to speak, and you have to care about the thriving and the ongoing health and benefit of the rose bush. So you can't just do random things. You have to do what's going to actually make it thrive.
Yeah.
So all of that is part of the subsidiaries. The focal point is I have this task I need to do, but in order to do it, I need to learn all these other things. I have to develop this whole area of tacit knowledge of I mean, you have to think about all kinds of things, you know, it's like raising a baby. You have to develop a relationship with the baby to know what they want and what the cry means and what it means when they're yelling at you and when they're whimpering and, you know, or having a dog. You have to know them. You have to understand them. And it's the same way with a motorcycle. You have to develop a relationship with the motorcycle. And that means it's in essence, when you take relationality all the way down to its essence, it's love. You have to develop a loving relationship with whatever it is.
Yeah, and if you have that loving relationship, then the next thing to do is going to be, you know, it's going to shine forth as the next quality thing to do. So you need to maintain that love, or you can say, well, that's going to take too long, and then you just cut corners. So it depends on what, if you have that loving relationship, then you're going to know what the quality thing is to do next, what to prune, don't prune here, prune there. It would be easier to just cut all these leaves off and be done with it. But if you're caring about it, you're not going to do that. You're going to do it the right way. So you've got a choice, maybe you're hit with the quality stimulus, but how you use it after that, how you're going to analogize is what Pirsig would use. The quality stimulus starts getting baked into the system. Like, if they're working on technology and you've got someone who really knows what they're doing, is a great programmer and has an idea of where he wants to go. And then management says, nope, we just have to, just don't take all that time. We've just got to get this thing, get this patch in, and that's it. So this guy may have this idea, and this happens all the time. And
yes, it certainly does. Yeah.
And so I think the thing is, like, if you're looking at technology, how is it going to be high quality? And again, this is something we're really talking about this corner. The whole understanding of reality has to switch. The whole prioritization has to switch. And I think it would be unrealistic to say, well, we're just not going to do anything for the money. We're just going to do things for quality. But in a weird way, we do have to integrate some of that.
Yeah, and in a weird way, the boss does have to make the decision. You have to cut some corners here, because if we don't get the product out, next month, then the competitors are going to come in and they're going to get the product out, and then all this work that you did for it is going to go for nothing. So then you don't have a product at all, right? Yeah. So you live within this whole system of constraints.
Yeah, you do, and you have to make. And then you could also say, well, if you're making quality decisions, you could say caring about making money. And so so those decisions are going to be of a different, what is perceived as quality in that framework is going to be different from something else. So it seems to me that what has to happen if technology isn't going to be so low quality, because if the whole point of technology is to capture people's attention in order to make money and not really do anything to make society better, then that's a problem. But at the same time, how is some social media platform going to continue to exist if they're not making money?
Well, and I think what's happening now, which just started wiring up in my head as you were talking, is that what we call the basement technologies. I've got this thing that comes through my window and makes a light right to my face.
You're kissed with sunlight.
Yeah. What we call these basement technologies, that which makes it possible for the apps and the attention grabbing things to operate. You have to have the chips, and you have to have the routers, and you have to have the hubs, and all these things that are underneath that are supporting these, that are supporting FANG, Facebook, Apple, Netflix, Google. They're supported by this whole understructure. Yeah. So all these people on the understructure, they really care about producing a quality product. My husband is one of those guys down here in the understructure. And he gets super excited about being able to produce something that's never been made before, never been seen before, that can do these amazing things, that can produce these opportunities. But then the people at the top have much less infrastructure cost, much less total cost, basically, because they're just working with ideas and they're implementing ideas. Exactly. And these ideas are what are grabbing people's attention and in some ways leading us off into this weird space. Yeah. But they're doing it on this foundation of all this beautiful technology that's been produced. And what's on top could be amazing, because all this infrastructure that's down here that's ready to support beauty and creativity and everything else. But instead we get this, what's going to get clicks and what's going to, motivate people in that direction. But the other thing I wanted to say before I forget it is when we were talking about loving something in order to knowing something, in order to have a relationship with it, in order to make it better, it occurred to me, why don't I do that with myself? Wouldn't that be lovely?
Tell me what you mean.
If I thought of myself as being as important as the rose bush, as meaningful as the rose bush, then I would take care of myself the same way. Right?
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Most of us don't. I mean, I think this whole COVID thing kind of exposed that.
Do you take care of yourself during COVID? Are you taking your vitamin C and your
I'm taking
your zinc?
C, yep.
Okay.
But I think that, we just saw that people were just so vulnerable, much more vulnerable than you would think, because of just eating anything that appeals to them and not taking care of diet, not taking care of exercise. And so some people, it looks like the people who are the most vulnerable, besides the older people, the people who were most vulnerable had some of those metabolic issues, from just years and years and years of Doritos and a lot of the countries like that.
Yeah, well, I completely understand, because I had lost a lot of weight before COVID started, but then being locked in for 2 years really.
Yeah, no, it was.
I started gaining it back, and then I have to look at myself on the screen every day. It's really hard. So, well, I do want. I know your time is limited, and I do want to go on to the second part of the video with Jonathan. So I'm going to go back to share screen.
Okay, that's
and
great.
We'll take a look at that. At least I know we're in the right place here. So. And this, I think, starts at about 35.
But you need a way for those two things to kind of, I mean, you could say it like that. God is the manner in which you understand that those two resolve into one. That they don't, that there isn't this eternal opposite, and that's one of the problems that Christianity is trying to always deal with, the problem of the eternal opposite, that you see in Gnosticism or you see in a lot of the ancient religions, that in fact reality actually has a common oneness out of which the quality and quantity come together. And that's also why there's this resurrection, because without the non-duality, you don't have it. You can't, how can you understand resurrection? Because you have, let's say, quality and quantity that start to pull apart, and then they things start to fragment, and the ideas go up into heaven or whatever, they disincarnate, you could say, and then things start to break apart. And but then how does it, what's the thing that the mystery that brings things back, and that's the mystery of non-duality. And so people don't realize that Christianity is a non-dual religion. It is a non-dual religion. God is non-dual. It's not, there is no duality between God and the world. God informs all of the world, that God is hidden in manifestation. We don't confuse God and manifestation. We don't say, we're not pantheists, we don't say everything is God, but we do believe that ultimately everything is in God, is the way to say it, something like that. And so that, to me, that's why, and I guess, there are non-dual religions that won't tend to personify or to see the person, or to see the infinite in personal ways, you could say, something like that. Or that will say that when people talk about impersonal, the idea that the absolute is impersonal, you see that in Buddhism as well. But I think that's problematic in the sense that we talked about, that you mentioned before, that I talked about with Paul, which is that there is a way in which God is impersonal and is suprapersonal or something like that, but God will always encounter us personally. That the place where the infinite and the particular meet, the place within is going to be an analogous to what we understand as personal. And so that's why we also encounter God as God is personal also, like because we are personal and we are the meaning makers. We are the meaning, those who encounter meaning, we are persons. And so there's that, all of that has to be part of the infinite somehow. And so that's the image, you can't use another image of God besides that. Always understanding that God is beyond all those images. You always have to, when we talk about God, we say Father. When we talk about God, we say Son. When we talk, there's no other way to talk about these realities, which are ultimately beyond all name and all word. I don't know if that makes sense in the sense that if you want to go to, let's say, if you want to stop at quality, you're going to have that problem, which is how do you deal with the opposition that you've set up?
So before you respond to that, I just wanted to add one thing to what Jonathan was saying, is that one of the other reasons that it's so important that God be personal, that God be a person, is that if we, like a lot of modern thinkers might want to say, oh, he's the world force, or he's, he's the source of all energy, or something like that, is that then God becomes something that we can use or manipulate.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
A tool,
Yeah.
right? Right. So in order for there to be a relationship, God has to be a person. Okay. So you go on, and I can either let you say it on here, I can let you say it live. You go on to talk about dynamic quality being what unites the two opposites. Do you want to go into it live, or do you want me to play what you said before?
Yeah, play what I said before, because I can't remember what I said, and then because I feel like I'm a
how
little
does he
bit.
deal with it?
Well, he deals with it. It's again this dynamic quality which unites the two opposites, because let me give an analogy of how it actually plays out in the book. So you have a problem. Let's say it's something with the motorcycle, and so you see the problem, but it's not the non-dual, is the quality and the item. And your relationship with the item has to change, has to update constantly. So quality is helping you do that, so you can actually fix the thing. And that means that it's not just an objective piece of metal. You become involved with it. There's a communion between you and the motorcycle. And I guess Vervaeke might call this the flow state. It's where you are in communion with the physical world, and you're improving it, and you're informed by this desire, let's say God's will for the good. I do think that there's something, maybe the dynamic quality is a symbolic representation of God or Christ. I have also a difficulty understanding in your philosophy what exactly is the difference between, it sounds so silly, and I'm sorry to ask this question, but what is the difference in your philosophy between God and Christ?
Now, I thought that was a brilliant question. I didn't think that was a silly question at all. And this was 2 years ago.
Yeah.
So have you come to any conclusion about the relationship between who we think of as God and who we think of as Christ?
Well, it seems to me that, looking more at Peugeot's book, that Christ is the mediator between heaven and earth. Is that correct? I mean, is it something like that?
Well, I want to know what you're thinking. I'll tell you what I think, but I want to know. I want to understand your perspective.
I mean, this one is hard to work out because we're talking a lot about, embodiment and incarnation, and I don't think I have any set ideas yet. And I think what Jonathan was worried is that I just saw qualities, this force, just flying around and it's the same as God. It's not. I would say that. Gosh, this is tough because this is the stuff I'm kind of thinking about, and I haven't still come up with any kind of, conclusion that's all that coherent. But let's just say, that Christ is probably, this might be a Jordan kind of thing. It's the embodiment. If you think of yourself as imbued with quality, and that Christ is the embodiment of that. That's one way to look at it. The highest quality individual. And that you as a person, if you care, if you're going in the right direction, are always going towards something like that. But I don't think in Pirsig's philosophy, you've actually, and this is the big differentiation with Christianity and with metaphysics of quality and with Eastern religions, is that in Christianity, you have a concept, if you have a highest good, it's conceptualized as God in a way. I mean, Pajot's God, if you listen to him talk about it, isn't exactly like that. It's not a man in the sky of any nature, anything like that. But it has to hit you in a person. I'm having a really hard time with this. I'm sorry.
Oh, that's okay. I mean, but listen, theologians have been talking about this for thousands of years, right?
But I think the difference is that, and I talked about this with my discussion with Rafe, which we just had. I'm about to put it on. That in Western religion, there is kind of a conception of that embodiment, in that God is a person. I mean, you may not really know what he looks like. And as Pajot was saying, there's this element of hidden unknownness in God. But when God expresses himself to you, maybe that is through Christ. Maybe that is through an embodied individual. You still have in Christianity an idea of Christ, and you kind of even know what he looks like. I mean, whether you should or shouldn't, that is, whether that's fair, whether that's ideal in Christianity, I'm not sure, but I suspect it's not. I suspect Christ is that in between heaven and earth. So you don't really picture what he looks like, but you sense him as an individual that is there, to guide you, or that you want to be, that is this being, let's say. In metaphysics of quality and in Eastern religion, so you are going towards that. You're trying to become that. You're trying to embody that. You're trying to embody Christ. In Eastern religions and metaphysics of quality, the quality isn't, you don't know where it's taking you. It's just taking you. It's just moving you along in the right direction. And it really depends on what you care about. I mean, I think that quality could be used by parasitic processing and not take you in the right direction. In Pirsig,
yeah, I mean, that's exactly what we're seeing with the internet, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I think Pirsig is saying, he'll say, real quality isn't that. Real quality is not going to have these traps and these barriers. You're going to be on the right track. You're not even going to have to, you're really not going to have to think about it if you're truly guided in that direction. And ultimately, that guiding towards the right direction is going to be very similar as a Christian trying to embody Christ. So the outcome would be the same, because these are both, these Eastern religions, they have to have something, that's something that actually works in the world going for them, even if it isn't an embodiment of that per se. And I think that's the difference in the two ways of seeing. One is towards something, the other is being compelled by something. And that being compelled by something isn't really conceptualized as a person. I think Pirsig is a little different because he's combining both of them. He's combining that being, pulled along by this, but towards something better. So there's a whole evolutionary component in the metaphysics of quality. And as you go up the evolutionary ladder, the thing at the top is better. So it is an embodiment of, there's a lot of embodiment in Pirsig, because the static patterns of value are embodied. They are embodied or they're not. They can be ideas, but they still are beings. They still are patterns. They still are, you could say, things. He says that everything in the dictionary, every noun is a static pattern of value. So there's an embodiment element in it but not such as that it would be an individual as in Christianity.
Well, I'm gonna throw out something here because I'm a very simple thinker. And so these are the very simple structures that have made sense to me over the years since I first believed in Christ when I was 32 years old. And one of the things that I learned early on that really made sense to me was that religion per se is a structure of ideas, rules, regulations for how to move up the ladder, how to get to God.
Yeah.
But that Christianity is Jesus Christ reaching down and lifting us up. And that in itself is a little bit of a paradox because Jesus says, if I be lifted up, I will draw all men unto me. And when he says that, it's very clearly a reference to that episode in the Old Testament when the Israelites were being beset by snakes. And God told Moses to put a bronze serpent on a pole and hold it up above the people. And those who looked upon the bronze serpent would live. But those who didn't look upon the bronze serpent would be eaten by the snakes. So when Jesus says, if I be lifted up, I will draw all men unto me. But he doesn't mean the kind of lifted up, if you exalt me and worship me and make me higher by all the things that you do, I will draw all men unto me. He means if you look at my sacrifice and if you draw other people's eyes to my sacrifice, then that will put me in a place where everybody can see that there is a way out of this mess, and then I will draw all people to me. So he is the one who is drawing, always drawing upward, right? But then we are also compelled by love. So, you know, there's a verse that love constrains us. Love is kind of the boundary that makes our creativity possible. But then love is also kind of pushing us forward, or pushing us upward. And then love is also drawing us. So there's these three aspects of love. And so I think as I listen to you talk about Pirsig, it seems to me as though when he talks about quality, it's almost exactly the same thing as the Christian picture of love, with one difference, but maybe there is this in Pirsig and I just don't know about it because I haven't studied him, and that would be the sacrificial side of love, which is a little bit, it's an easy enough concept to be completely scalable and for everybody at every level to be able to understand it, but it also can easily be twisted into a kind of faux altruism, saccharine, you know, I'm sacrificing myself for you, putting guilt trips on other people and all that kind of thing, right? So there's a beautiful kind of sacrifice, and then there's this other twisted, ugly kind of sacrifice thing.
So remember when Jordan was talking about burning off what you don't need to become something better?
Yes.
It seems to me that in Pirsig, the sacrifice would be letting your value, you know, if letting your preconceived notions, you've got the certainty of the preconceived notions and you want to stick with those. You want to stick within the system of you've made this hierarchy and you know it's right. And the sacrifice would be letting that hierarchy go when you get information that it's not right. And one of the traps to acting on quality would be the desire to maintain that hierarchy, to maintain that system, even though you're getting evidence that you really need to let it go and follow quality and let this whole system, hierarchy, whatever you're doing, update. So I think the sacrifice
says burning off. What picture do you get of that?
I get the picture of if you've got these preconceived notions and you've made a structure and it's comfortable and it's you have some certainty. You wouldn't make this structure if you didn't have certainty, like some kind of idea of how a person is, right? And it's easy for you to say, well, I love this person, he's like this. And then you get some information that he's not exactly like that, you know, so you have to let that go and love the person still. You have to allow that update and still, and you know, like you've sacrificed maybe some idea of the person. You've sacrificed something that you thought maybe was positive about this person that was causing you to love them. And you need to update the reality of the person and start working with them to improve the love. Let's just say that would be a situation in a relationship. You know, you discover something about your husband that you don't really like all that much. So rather than sticking to, you know, the desire for that to be that way, and then going in the direction of, you know, the sacrifice, I love you despite this and I'm putting up with it. You know, the better thing to do is update the system. You and him work together with this new information and see what you can create that's of higher quality.
Mm-hmm.
So the sacrifice is getting rid of the preconceived notions or the certainty.
So one of the other pictures I've been working with lately, especially after all the conversations I've had with Glenn, who is a physicist and
Those are so interesting.
a computer
Mhm.
scientist and engineer. I mean, he has many hats.
Mhm.
And one of the pictures that we came to is that starting all the way back before life and going all the way up as high as you can go, there has to be something that is similar to a lock and a key.
Mhm.
I say mechanism, but
Mhm.
it isn't really a mechanism. Imagine an organic, living, beautiful thing, one thing being enfolded by another. I mean, you could think of the sexual image of the lock and the key.
Mhm.
The lock has to be there for the key to have any function. And the key has to be the appropriate shape in order to open the lock. So they have to be fully integrated. And that picture, I think of the word that comes to my mind is a fittedness. We have to have a fittedness to reality. So if we think of reality as the structure that's already there,
Mhm.
and our relationship with reality needs to be one of love, so that we allow ourselves to be fitted to reality rather than trying to force reality to fit itself to us.
Mhm.
Right?
Yeah.
And I think that fits in with some of what Pirsig is talking about. Like when you were talking about updating, like in your marriage, I love my husband. So if I find out something about his personality that seems annoying to me,
Mhm.
maybe there is as you said, maybe there's a higher truth
Mhm.
embedded in that. And that if I can continue to love him and explore with him that aspect, if we can speak truthfully about it to each other, we can find this higher thing, and then we can move to a new place, right?
Yeah.
So it's allowing ourselves to love the beauty of reality and then be fitted to it.
Mhm.
And so when you think about God and Christ is the image of the invisible God.
Mhm.
And when that image is not necessarily a body, it's not the body that's the image of the invisible God, but it's the beauty of the reality of God, that is this essence of, not essence, this action of love, the love that chooses, the love that always chooses for our good and for our benefit and for our growth and our nurturing, the love that always chooses the path that will make it possible for us to have that growth, even if that choice means that is sacrifice on his side.
Mhm.
Right. And so to me, that's the one thing that seems to be missing from Pirsig's picture, is that this quality, it's hard to see. I understand Jonathan's confusion because it's hard to see the quality as being a person that wants to have a relationship with us rather than just an idea.
Well, if you look at the evolutionary levels, I mean, I would say that metaphysics of quality definitely isn't, you could run your life using it, but it would be hard to implement in practice in, what am I trying to say here? Pirsig has these evolutionary levels. And I think Jonathan's, I think Christianity is a manifestation of quality, of acting out quality. You know, he's got the three levels that we are concerned with as human beings, is the biological, the social, and the intellectual. Christianity really isn't a biological thing, and it's not an intellectual thing. And I think Jonathan emphasizes this. It's quality on the social level. For a human being, it occurs almost entirely in the social level. I mean, you're going to have, and the social level essentially is there to prevent biology from, and this is going to sound very, I don't mean to just be at all dismissive. I'm just, you know, through the lens of metaphysics of quality. The social level is there to protect us from biological interference, and it's also there to support like the intellect. All the thoughts in our head come from the social level, so it's unbelievably important, and it keeps being dismissed in modern society. Christianity is the highest expression, I think, of a the highest quality social pattern of value. And Christ is an embodiment of that. It's not, you know, there are things in the intellectual realm, there are ideas that Christianity supports in the intellectual realm. You could talk about theology. Equality, I think, of human beings is one of those ideas, a very high quality intellectual notion. It's also a relationship, because you've got both ends. It's also a relationship with nature on the biological end, as you know, a non-exploitative reverence for nature, but not one. But it's also, Christianity has rules that say you don't succumb to your biological urges. You know, you're always going for something higher. So the metaphysics of quality instantiated in the social level in a very high quality way is Christianity. It's not meant to answer all, you know, it's an undercurrent, it's a metaphysics, and how it's used and how it ends up being used is different depending, because because it's metaphysical, you could transfer it to anything. Any high quality pattern of value is going to have this harmony of these levels, I think.
Well, do you think you could say that it is that it could be seen as being nested within Christianity?
Not, I would say not, because ideas of, you know, metaphysical ideas like this precede Christianity. They go way back.
Well, Christianity precedes Christianity.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, Jesus said, before Abraham was, I am.
Yeah, yeah.
And he was in the beginning with God before the foundations of the universe. So you can't in a certain sense, you can't precede Christianity.
Yeah, no, I see exactly what you're saying, and I totally respect that. I think what I would say is, I would say that if you see the four horsemen of meaning together, you see four different ways of living where each of the individuals is on a quality path. whether you agree or not with what path he's on, you can't deny that there's complete authenticity and desire for the highest good in the hearts of all four of those men.
Yes.
So what you've got is, you've got four very, very playable games in the world, let's just say. And I would say that the principles that guide the playableness or the quality of these games, you could say is like the metaphysics of quality, but you could also say as a Christian that all four of these men are being guided by Christ, but only two of them really know it. But that doesn't mean that the other two aren't, if you're looking at it from a Christian lens. And that's also saying,
well, and one of the paradoxes of being a Christian is that there are times in my own Christian life, and I don't think I'm that rare a creature. There are times that I'm guided by Christ, and there are times that I'm not guided by Christ, because, you know, the framework we use, or the language that we use, is sometimes I walk in the flesh and sometimes I walk in the spirit.
Yeah.
And I'm, you know, you and Jonathan were talking about all the different kinds of personalities that inhabit each of us. There are times when I'm walking in the flesh and I don't even know myself. If I looked back at that person and I, you know, who was I being then when I was doing that, you know, or, and there's times when I'm walking in the spirit that I'll do things and say things, and then afterwards I'll say, where did that even come from? I had no, you know, I don't know where that came from, because I was creating something or saying something that was beyond my own capacity. But those things are happening all the time, even though I believe I have all these propositional beliefs and I have the trust and the faith and all of those things. There's still times that I walk in the flesh, and maybe more often than not, I walk in the flesh. But the hope is that over time, you know, that I make progress towards walking in the spirit more often than I'm walking in the flesh.
Yeah.
Jordan, I was listening to an old lecture of Jordan's today. I think it's Personality episode 14 or 17, something like that, where he's talking about Viktor Frankl. And
that was the first one I ever saw.
He's talking about the congruent personality. And there are so many parts of my own personality that aren't congruent, that I want to be congruent, but it requires that devotion to the truth, you know, to get out of self-deception and to be honest about who I am, and to not try to protect my own reputation by the things that I say. You know, even in marriage, I say we, as everybody's like me. I myself, even in my own marriage, I will say things to protect my reputation with my husband that aren't really true.
Yeah.
Maybe I can convince myself that there's some aspect of it's true so that I can say it. But afterwards, I know I did that in order to get out of something, in order to not fess up to something, right?
Yeah.
But I want, at the end, I want that congruence.
Right. And you're also talking about the sacrifice there too. You know, your sacrifice would be dealing with the thing that you are avoiding.
Yes. And the thing that occurred to me is that if I dealt with the underlying problem, I wouldn't have to say the thing to protect my own reputation, because my reputation wouldn't need protecting. You know? Like, I think Jonathan used the example of, why did I eat that piece of cake? You know, why did I do that? And well, I was hungry. Well, no, maybe I wasn't really hungry. You know, maybe it was something else going on there. And so that's definitely. So anyway, going back to the thing about God and Christ being the image of the invisible God, and the logos, the word, that also means he's God's communication to us.
Right. Well, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Because, and one of the examples that I read years ago, there's this wonderful, I used to read a lot of missionary books, and I'll tell you, those are formative. When you read books about missionaries that have been in really difficult circumstances. And so this one is called and then we'll go after I tell this little story. It's called Bruchko, Bruchko, and it's about this young man that wanted desperately to be a missionary, but because he wasn't educated, none of the missionary organizations would take him. So he just got enough money together to go to South America and walk up into the mountains to see if he could reach some unreached tribe. But unfortunately, or fortunately, he was captured by a cannibalistic tribe and put in a cage and ended up being captured by this tribe for 20 some years.
Oh, wow.
And they didn't eat him, fortunately, but all they gave him to eat was grubs, stuff like that, And they gave him a minder, a guy that was supposed to watch him all the time.
Mhm.
And he became friends with that minder. And he was able to learn the language. And in learning the language, he also heard a lot of stories, the tales and the myths that they told. And one of the myths that they told in their culture was, it had, and I don't remember all the details of it, but it had something to do with, they would sit around the fire and they would tell this story to each other about the ants and how the ants were doing something that was always getting them into trouble. And they'd always end up in some kind of conflagration. I don't know, they'd get up into the fire or something. And so he was able to explain to them that the only way you could get the ants to change what they're doing, you couldn't just tell them because they wouldn't be able to hear you. You're big, you're outside their world. But if you could become an ant, then you could explain to them that what they're doing is leading to their destruction.
Mhm.
And so that's what God did. He became an ant to come down and live with us and show us that what we're doing is leading to our destruction and that he has a better way. And so he's God's communication to us, to come down to our level and then to show us the way to go back up. And so he reaches down and folds us and lifts us back up again, rather than us trying to figure out a way to climb our own way out of it.
No, that makes a lot of sense. I think you've really clarified some things I needed to understand in this, while I'm on this journey myself of, trying to figure this out.
Well, sometimes I think the simple words work better than the
I think you're right.
subsidiary focal integration.
Yeah. Well, it's funny about those terms. Sometimes, I think sometimes there's no way to really get around some of that stuff. And I think that Vervaeke with his glossary, let's say, if we have to talk in those terms, it's nice to have one place where they're all coming together. Because I think with Vervaeke's vocabulary, you can pretty much find something that's going to describe most of these processes. I mean, ultimately, I like the simplicity and what you're doing. And I think maybe a story itself in lieu of a term is probably, is very effective.
Well, that's probably why you got so captivated by Pirsig's book, right? Because it's a narrative, it's a story.
It explains, he'll say, here's the philosophy and here's how but it's the story, it's the development of it. And then he, in both books, it's a little less obvious in Lila, but in both books, he'll make these statements about the philosophy and then play them out in the narrative. And they're really subtle.
He must be a really gifted writer. I wish I had time to read it.
There's a lot of things we wish we had time to read.
I know. The older I get, the less time I have. It's as though each day just goes that much faster because of it being a smaller part of my overall life, So
but like your channel's really ambitious. I really admire what you're doing. You really produce a lot of content. So this must be quite time consuming.
it is. And the frustrating thing is, like, for this, I way over prepared for our talk. I have enough material here for 8 hours. And so I spend all that time preparing because I'm afraid, at bottom, I'm afraid I'm gonna say something wrong, or I'm not gonna have something available at the moment that I need it. And so I kind of way over prepare. But then at the end, it's way better if I just leave that all aside and just listen and respond. And, so.
Well, would you say some of this preparation we do, even if we don't use it explicitly, kind of builds those, what did she say, subsidiaries?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And so they make the conversation richer when you've got this background,
Yeah, and there's no question that if I can lay them aside and just let my mind reintegrate, it's very helpful.
Yeah.
If I come into it thinking I've got to cover this and this and this and this, and if I focus on those things, it never works well.
It's like playing the piano. It's like the piano analogy, which is so great,
Yeah. Or in the end, it's, conversation is a dance, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is our third conversation. This has been really pleasant.
Yeah.
Really nice.
I could talk to you all day, every day, Sevilla.
Well, I just really,
You must be a wonderful counselor. I wish I could have a counselor like you. It'd be great.
Thank you. They tell me I'm a good listener. Well, I really am interested in, I'm tending to think more in the Pajot direction. I mean, that book is so compelling, and he's getting really sophisticated. He always has been. But did you watch, I'd love to do, I think I'm going to do a video on this, More Than the Four Horsemen. I mean, I was thinking about, and I might do a little snippet here and there on that, because there was some good stuff in there. But he's got this talk he gives to the Young Society on, I'm sure you saw it on Peterson's channel.
The one that Peterson put up, yeah.
Yeah, and it's like 25 minutes of him encapsulating this, I call it a metaphysics. It's a metaphysics of Christianity.
It's a worldview.
Does it seem that way to you?
Well, he's laying out the structure of reality.
Yeah, well, not of Christianity. I shouldn't say that, because that's not even what the language of creation is about, Genesis. But it's the underlying structure of reality, and how the Bible does the same thing that, Pirsig at a much higher level, obviously doing the same. This is the structure of reality, and here's how it plays out in stories.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that structure of reality itself, the actual metaphysical principles, do map on the metaphysics of quality really well. And I think the thing is, like these four horsemen, like I was saying, you've got four very legitimate and very high quality ways of existing in the world.
Mm-hmm.
I think that these universals, these metaphysics, are the same. Like, they may be slightly different, and you may disagree with certain parts of them, but underlying these metaphysics are very similar. The basics are the same.
Mm-hmm.
Like the spirit and matter, you could say static and dynamic quality.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and and I would love to talk with you more about that someday, because one of the things that really occurred to me in listening to you is how many ways this all kind of maps over onto the thing that I've been doing with art.
Right.
But I know you have to go, but I wanted to just
I've got about 8 more minutes.
I wanted to finish up the Esther Meek thing, because I think this is the key thing that fits together with the metaphysics of quality.
Mm-hmm.
Is this. There's a couple things here.
I can't see that actually on my side. So if you could read it, that would be great.
You mean because it's not big enough?
It's totally gray.
Oh, really? I wonder why that's happening. Okay, sorry about that.
Okay. I mean, that's how these things are. I've been struggling with OBS.
Well, okay, so it says, we know we encounter reality because of unspecifiable retrospective and prospective richness. because of profound transformation of our venture, it transforms us, right?
Mhm.
And because of indeterminate future manifestations, which I think she goes on to explain here, integration not only organizes the clues we already have, but is fraught with promise, opening a horizon for further exploration. And then the last thing that I want to say is she says, we puzzle over the particulars, straining in anguish until a pattern manifests itself.
Mhm.
The experience of coming to know is just what Meek says. It is the experience of receiving a gift. Insight is by grace, coming
Mhm.
from elsewhere and opening a new world.
Mhm.
So the quality event
Mhm.
is that experience of receiving a gift.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
I think that's
Gift
good.
requires a giver.
Mhm.
You can't receive a gift from the social atmosphere or, a gift has to come from a giver. And so these
Mhm.
offerings of these love offerings of knowledge, of transformation, of insight are offered to us. And then if we care, if we love, then we can incorporate it into what we're doing. And this is the quality adventure, right? And so insight is by grace, coming from elsewhere and opening a new world. This fits in with what Jordan Peterson talks about when he says that we meet the transcendent at the limits of our knowledge. So when you get to the place that you're just at the periphery of your capacity to know, and then you need to know a little bit more, that's where you meet the transcendent. And
Yeah,
I
that
think
makes
that's
sense.
what Esther
Oh,
Meek
that
was
totally
talking
makes
about.
sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, that does tie really well back to what you started with Jordan Peterson.
Yeah. And I think it also ties in with, I think that Robert Pirsig stumbled upon a way, not stumbled, I mean, he thought his way through to a way to describe what that loving quality is that allows us to build a world of quality and beauty around us.
Mhm.
If we care.
Yeah, if we care.
Right? If we care. So.
And it's caring that which is where it's caring that it's caring about the right thing, I guess.
Well, here's a very simple picture. It's a gift. This gift is offered to you. Somebody gives you a gift. If I just take the box with the ribbon on it and I look at it and I think, oh, I can react with gratitude or not. That's step one. If I react with gratitude, okay, now I got the box with the ribbon on it. But if I never do anything with it, if I never open it up, if I never look at it, if I never use it, integrate it, it's nothing, right?
Right.
But if I care enough to if I believe that the giver gave me a good gift, then I'm going to open it up and I'm going to integrate it. If I have a suspicion about the giver, right, I may not open it up. I may think, oh, it's a bomb or it's a snake or something. But if I believe in the goodness of the giver, then I'm going to open it up and I'm going to make it part of my life, right?
Yeah. That's beautiful.
You're a delight.
So are you. Thank you for leaving me with that thought. And a little bit, I've been thinking about some of these Christian concepts, and that really helps me a lot.
Well, anytime you want to have another conversation, let me know. I'd like to show up on a quality existence one of these days.
Yeah, let's flip it next time.
Okay. Sounds good.
All right, Karen, thank you so much. And really, I mean, I've been so enjoying your paintings. You're so good.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
I hope that you can have some shows again soon. I know it's probably
come and visit me sometime. I have a house full. I'd be happy to give you anything you want.
Oh my goodness, I was going to ask you if I could buy one.
No, I'm giving it. I don't sell anymore. I just give it
Oh.
away. But I need
Where-
to know,
where-
I need to know somebody really loves it, because I'm not going to give it into a house where it's not going to be loved.
No, you're very talented. You're in San Diego, right?
No, I'm in the Bay Area between San Francisco and San Jose.
Oh, okay. So Paul is more south, more north.
He's more north
south
than I
you are.
am. He's about 3 hours north and east of me.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right. Yeah. I would think.
You know what? I would love to have a get together at my house for anybody who wanted to come, because I think I could fit about 30 people here for conference breakout rooms and have conversations and stuff. But I haven't figured out what to do about housing. You know, people would have to get a hotel or something.
Airbnb
I could
is
probably
okay.
find a cheaper hotel that would not be such expensive housing. And I could provide all the food if I thought people would come, but it's a little scary to put myself out there, because what if I give a party and nobody comes, you know?
Well, I think that, we've got to start thinking, because Paul and John and Jonathan were going to meet in Thunder Bay, a couple of years
Mhm.
ago, and that never
Yeah.
happened. So I'm hoping that we can all, we can meet in person somehow.
I was thinking this morning how great it would be if I could get either a Catholic church in this area or an Eastern Orthodox church to sponsor an event and have all 4 of those guys come. Wouldn't that be
Yeah,
terrific?
that would be great.
And actually, I would like to see a representative of the evangelical community in there, because I think we have a lot to offer. And I know a perfect representative, a man of just profound knowledge, but who's also gone through a lot of suffering. And I think he could bring a very deep perspective to the conversation. But it's a matter of finding a church with enough courage to
You're right.
sponsor something like this, right?
No, you're absolutely right. All right, Karen, it's 45. I've got to jump
Okay.
off.
Good talking to you.
Thank you so much.
Okay, thanks
I
for
really
this.
enjoyed
Thanks,
this.
Sevilla.
All
Bye-bye.
right, bye-bye.